Hey, I'm Chef Sarah Glover and this is my kitchen and it's your restaurant. I'm here in the beautiful Joshua Tree. It's about 2 hours out of LA. It's in California. I've got 3 amazing recipes for you and it's going to elevate your next camp trip. Let's get cooking. I get so many people kind of look at me with a bit of a blank look on the face when I tell them that I love to bake, particularly in the outdoors. So today I thought I would show you a really basic recipe that you can do with your kids or you can do around the campfire, but we're actually going to cook it in a pizza oven. I know, sounds bizarre, but let me show you some tips and tricks that are going to change your life forever. So this is a really basic recipe. I thought this would be perfect to show you guys. It's hard to screw up. It's scones, or in America they know them as biscuits, and we're gonna make sweet ones. So we're gonna make like a berry style biscuit. And what you're gonna need is flour, sugar to start with for your dry ingredients. So I've got 2 cups of flour, half a cup of sugar. Now you could replace this if you're not a big fan of sugar with like coconut sugar or anything like that. Monk fruit, stevia. I'm going to pop in 2 teaspoons of baking powder, about that. One thing I just want to let you guys know, you may not be like have a typical baking cup per se, but a little hack for you, as long as you keep the volume the same, so you just use the same cup for your measurement, your recipe is going to turn out. So I am going to give this a little light stir, basically just to mix through the baking powder into it so it's consistent. And I'm making what we call a well in the center of my flour. It's not super necessary. I've got this handy little reusable silicone Ziploc pouch. Grabbing out my butter, I want to have about half a cup, which is 125 grams, and these blocks are roughly 250, so I'm just going to halve it with my hands. Don't have scales out here in the wild. Just going to pop that in our bowl, and then what we're going to be doing is essentially coating our flour in a fat, and that's going to keep our scones nice and like flaky and light. So if you've ever made scones or biscuits and they tend to be a little chewy, it's because the gluten in the flour has been activated. So what this does essentially is coat our flour in a sort of fat, and it will stop when I add in my cream in a minute from activating my gluten prematurely. So just use your fingers. You can get your kids to do this as well if they're hanging out at the campsite. You want it to look like breadcrumbs, and essentially it's going to kind of take on board a little bit of a yellow color. I would recommend with this using a high quality butter if you can find some. I've got the Irish style butter. You can get raw butter. It does make a huge difference. Okay, so it's starting to resemble what we call breadcrumbs. You can see that. Sort of like little crummy bits. Now I'm going to put in my wet ingredients. Half a cup. I eyeballed that one. And we're just going to give that a light, what we kind of call a chop in. So we don't want to over stir our scones. We just want to chop it into our dough, just till it like lightly comes together. I may need to add a tiny bit more in. I'm just going to dump it all in. Why not? It's there to be used. And we just, again, don't want to overwork our dough. To me, that's looking ready to pour out onto my surface here. I'm going to put a little bit of flour down. All right, so I forgot to put the cranberries in. I'm just going to toss all of them. I don't really need to work that in. They're going to work in as I work this dough. So I'm just going to pop it on my surface here. Clean surface. And I'm just going to lightly bring this together. As you can see, there's still like crumbs in the dough. That's great. This is kind of where you want it to be. Again, you just don't want to overwork your dough because it's going to cause the gluten in your flour to activate. And that's going to make your scones or biscuit not nice and light and fluffy. Now I have got in my pizza oven a cast iron frying pan that I just popped in to heat up ever so slightly, and that's what we're going to be baking my scones in. Now, traditional way to make scones is kind of to get a cookie cutter and you cut them out. I've seen it kind of cool in the US where they kind of make it into like a cake shape And that's how they cook it. So we're going to do that today just for something different for all you Aussies watching down under. That's looking so, I mean, that looks pretty, doesn't it? Oh. All right, I've got my cast iron frying pan over here. I've heated it up a little bit. Just going to make some space here. All right, I'm just going to season the bottom of my pan with a little bit of extra flour, just so the scones don't stick to it and will come out. This is how in Australia we make damper. We make damper in our cast iron, we call it a Dutch oven. This is just a frying pan. So I've popped my scones in there. They're looking so good. You could brush them with a bit of milk, make them look pretty, but that's not necessary because I'm actually going to make an icing for this. And the trick with this is you're going to pop on your cast iron frying pan lid to it. Got my Gosney rock box over here, my pizza oven heating up. It's perfect because I can make scones now and pizza later. Pop my scone dough in there with the lid on, and it is going to cook in there for about 10 to 15 minutes. You do want to keep your lid on for the first 10 minutes and probably remove it for the last so it gets a little bit of golden color on top of it. But essentially this is like an oven. Now it does have a flame that throws over the top of it. A bit like if you were cooking on a campfire oven, as like a campfire as well. You just got to imagine you got all this heat under it and somehow you have to get heat on top of it without burning whatever it is you're cooking. So that's where the lid on your Dutch ovens come in really, really handy, so you can use them to your advantage. So if I was doing this on a fire, I would just add some coals to the top of it and I'd just keep an eye on it, like that it doesn't get too hot that it burns, but doesn't get too cool that that top doesn't get a bit of rise to it as well. So let's give it 10 minutes and we will check it. To go on top of my scones, I'm going to make a really simple icing. So this is powdered sugar. It's probably half a cup in there. And then I'm going to add a little extra something, and that is some lemon zest. So you can just get your zester. These zesters are my favorite. I bought this one from Target. It's part of the Magnolia range. And I just love it. It's so handy. It's a cute little size. It looks pretty. So I'm just giving a zest of probably a good teaspoon in there, depending on how much you like lemon, as much or as little as you want. I've got a little bit of milk. Now, the trick with making any icing is actually not to put too much liquid into it too fast, because the liquid dissolves the sugar. And so if you've ever made icing and it's like, why is this so runny, and you can't bring it back, it's just because you added your liquid way too quickly. So I always add my liquid in little increments, rather than it all at once, and you'll find you'll be able to just control the consistency of your icing so much better, particularly if you're doing like cake decorating and stuff like that. I'm just going to add a little bit of lemon juice to my icing because I like it extra lemony. Smells a little crispy. Let's hope I didn't burn it. All right, moment of truth. Oh well, that happens even to the best of us. But scone's looking good, a little crispy. That's okay. We're just going to let it rest now for probably 10 minutes. It does feel like it needs just a little bit more cook time on it. The way you can tell is it should be bouncing back, and I'm just getting a little bit of stodginess here. So I'm just going to let it rest. I think the rest time that I give it will just help it to cook through, because the cast iron pan actually has a lot of residual heat. So that heat that's just in that pan is enough alone to just keep that cooking for another 10 minutes. So let's leave it. Okay, my scones have rested now, and I'm really happy with how they're looking. Also, they're not too hot, and I'm going to burn my mouth when I shove it in my pie hole very soon. Okay, let's pop on some of our icing sugar dressing, our lemon dressing. Cover that mistake up over there. Some people like it charcoaly, so I guess there's a bit for everyone now, isn't there? Just going to use the back of our spoon and smear it over, and if you just give it a couple of minutes, it's going to melt really nicely into the scone. It's like kind of cut a pie in a dish, you know, it's just always a little, the first one's a bit of a sacrificial slice. It's actually not looking too bad. Pretty happy with that. Light and fluffy. Definitely could rest just a tiny bit more on my cook time, but I'm pretty stoked with how that turned out. Give it a try, let me know what you think. Pizza oven scone with zested dressing. Leave me a comment below, give it a try, bake it with your kids. If you're not out camping and you're just inspired and you're at home watching this, why not just make it in your oven with your kids and sit outside and have a picnic? I mean, trampoline's a great space for that too. Happy cooking.